Welcome to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gan, the podcast for people-centric leaders, business owners, and HR professionals who know that people are at the heart of business success. Join me and industry experts as we explore the key aspects of building a thriving company, sharing cutting-edge strategies, impactful insights, and the latest trends to help you ignite your business growth. It's time to rev up your leadership, rev up your success. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Rev Up Your Business. Today, my guest is Pari Nejatie. She is an executive recruiter that I consider gives white glove treatment. Welcome, Pari.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Hilda.
In this day and age, it's so hard to find top talent. And when we decided to talk about presence on LinkedIn, branding strategies that open doors not just for individuals who are searching, but for organizations that are looking. So thank you, Pari, for joining me.
I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, Hilda. Thank you.
Great. Let me tell people a little bit more about you before we get started. Pari is a trusted executive recruiter with over 20 years of experience in C-suite recruiting across various industries, specializing in roles such as CEO, CFO, COO, and executive leadership. She helps organizations quickly secure top talent and enhance human capital performance by providing honest, expert recruitment services tailored to evolving marketing conditions and business opportunities. Let's get started. You are really good at searching for the right candidates, and you do use LinkedIn a lot. So why don't you share some kind of tips and strategies on how to make people stand out and to use their headlines to their best advantage?
For sure. So I think the last set of numbers that were run on LinkedIn were there's 30 million users in Canada alone. So you have to think about the C that you're competing with, whether it's with colleagues for opportunities or as a company. How do you secure these profiles if you have potentially 30 million profiles to screen? And that's just Canada alone. And I think internationally.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was worldwide to Canada.
No, just in Canada alone.
Wow.
Now, if everyone's active, it's a different number. But again, that's how many subscriptions are there right now with LinkedIn. So when we typically look at a profile, we need seconds. We don't take minutes. We don't delve. We don't scroll. We don't read further. So everything matters. And if you know LinkedIn, first half of the page of LinkedIn, when you click on someone's page, is their image and is their banner and the language they use. Everything matters at the very top. Further down, it takes a bit more time. So what I've noticed historically is many people haven't spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. They set it up and they move on with their lives. They forget to keep it updated. They forget to update their image, banner, companies they've partnered with, or projects they're working on. It's just something they don't really touch on. So my goal is to bring people awareness that as headhunters, we scour, we look, we verify, and we need to do that within seconds. So if you don't grasp our attention within seconds, we're going to move on. And that is not safe for
I think that's so true. You know, when my husband and I had our company, we hired hired co-op students, and literally pre-digital, I would have a stack this high, like 50 resumes. People got 30 seconds, and it was that headline that drew me. And then if I read a little bit, if it didn't resonate, off they go. And now in this digital age where LinkedIn, you're right, you've got so many seconds. I'm a Fascination certified advisor, as you know, and one of the things we do when I do my training in how to fascinate people is that you have 7 seconds to impress somebody. That's the attention span of a goldfish. So you can't secure your job, but you certainly can make an impression. So yeah. Like,
for sure.
You go through so many LinkedIn profiles, they got to make that impression or you move on, right?
Yeah. And it's not something we can control. We're on a tight deadline. One of the reasons clients work with us is because we move quick. But there's a risk to that as well, that if you don't have a profile that stands out, we will move quickly on. And obviously, if we're referred to someone, we'll spend more time on their LinkedIn profile, but typically it's seconds. It's less than 7, Hilda. It's not even
Oh,
7.
I know. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the 7 seconds is when we're meeting face to face.
right.
You don't
Oh,
impress
yeah.
me in the first 7 seconds. I'm moving on to the next recruiter or the next insurance agent or the next lawyer. Like it just, you gotta know. So
Mhm.
do you have some good tips and strategies on how we would optimize the headline part?
Yeah, even before the headline, the image is very important. So your headshot is very critical. And I think a decade ago, headshots were not that popular. They became a bit more mainstream. People would just take selfies and post it from their vehicle in their backyard. Um, just, casual settings, but LinkedIn is a professional setting. We have to remember that. I always tell people the only reason we should have a beach image on your profile is if you're a travel agent. There shouldn't be any other reason for it. Um, and even I have had professionals in the veterinary business, they may not be a vet themselves, but they promoted animals and that would make more sense, right? So just think about it. Having a picture with your lab is not always the best way to promote. I know it shows a soft side to you and you're approachable, but LinkedIn is not meant for that. It's to convey a very clear message about what type of professional you are. So headshots are really important. And if you don't want to purchase or see someone to do them, you can use quite a few free software on your phone. There's great programs that will clean up an image and make it sell in a more professional environment.
And I think too, if people think of it, that LinkedIn profile is branding. What
Hmm.
image do you want to create? We're doing a training, Laurel Carr and I right now. It's called the Business Leadership Breakthrough Program. And she does Colby, which is about how you process the world and take action easily, instinctively. And I do Fascination, which is how do you communicate with the world, how the world sees you communicate. And it's a branding tool. So
Mm.
think about LinkedIn, think about how you present yourself to the world is a branding tool. So are you
Mm.
Volkswagen? Are you a Toyota? Are you a Chevrolet? That think about that mentally. What kind of image do you want to create? And it's not a personal image, it's a professional image, right?
Right. And be authentic and true to yourself. Something else we also recognize, and it's a big portion of real estate on LinkedIn, is your banner. People
Mm-hmm.
typically put the company they work for as their banner, which is great, but I always say your employer has their own page. This is about the individual. Hilda's page is for Hilda, and the People Bright's page is for People Bright, promoting Hilda, right?
What would you
So
suggest would be a good banner for somebody from a personal professional point of view, not putting their company's banner on the back?
unless you're the CEO of the company, don't do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, everyone has to understand LinkedIn, the banner is very long and your
Mm-hmm.
image is to the bottom left. Anything populating behind you just distracts from the image. So I always say use very neutral tones behind your image. And if you have language, if you want to promote something, make sure it's on the right side. So it's a more balanced image. And people don't typically do that. They have all the heavy stuff on the left and then their pictures in front of it. And then it gets so messy. And again, it goes back to me having seconds. If I get distracted and I'm trying to figure out what's behind you, I'm no longer focusing on the individual or the professional. So we always ask for something balanced. And what I typically like is don't leave the generic LinkedIn template in the back. It's horrendous. The colors are not flattering on anyone. Use a neutral tone. And I always like that little signature that's very modern. It's very unique, just putting your first and last name signature and balancing it with your image. You could do that free on Canva. It's not something you have to spend a lot of money for. But something as elegant as that will make the viewer think you spend time and you do care and you are making an effort.
Any other tips and strategies along
For
that
the
line?
headlines and liners, so we don't typically say what we're doing. That's on your resume, that's further down under experience. We talk about what type of professional you are. So someone who's in accounting, that's payroll, bookkeeping, we don't want to just say bookkeeper. That's very specific. They're actually a finance professional, especially if they're mid-career, or if they're an accounting professional if they're mid-career. So we have to think about the umbrella term whenever we look at someone's headline, right? So if I'm an engineer and I specialize in AI, we have to use language that encompasses the two together, not just the title of team lead, which could be their title in their current company. So that team lead does not translate to AI software engineer or AI engineer and their title, right? So we
And I
have to think
think
about what's a bigger umbrella term for titles.
And you're talking about on the banner or on in the bio?
Title underneath your name.
Okay. So here's the dilemma, sometimes people their title is such and such, okay? Lead, project lead, which is not a unique identifier, but then they say, but if I use something else that's in everyday language, am I falsifying records? Because that's not my title at work, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so the spot underneath your name doesn't have to be your title. That goes further down under experience.
Yep.
Right? We talk about what type of professional you are, right? What is your umbrella term? In your case, you'd be an HR executive. So that's what we would focus on. If you're a founder of a company, you could do that as well, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I keep mine very, very simple. It's executive search. I don't say executive search specializing in life science within labs and wet labs in particular. Like then again, too much language, too distracting. And something I see with people with multiple designations, they put everything there. They put their BSc, they put the high school, they go as far back as possible. And when again you're mid-career or you're in an executive role, you do not need to go further back. You talk about the most relevant information that you bring to the table, right?
It's very hard to try to condense things for some people, and yet it's so important. And so sometimes you do need a second pair of eyes to do something.
Correct.
I remember somebody who, you're doing your 90-second elevator pitch, or you're working one-on-one with each other to learn about each other. And the person spent the first 2 minutes and he hadn't even got through graduation yet, and he'd been a lawyer for 30 years. Like, I know you're a lawyer. Why are we talking about what you did at high school, what you did in university, and why you chose law? So really, really be like brutal in terms of making sure that you're concise and clear and detailed, so you get that attention of the people by telling me, like wowing me in the first 30 seconds with tiny little bit of detail that entices me, right?
And when it goes to executive presence and leadership, if you're in a position of being a thought leader and a decision maker in a company, you should be best suited to make very, very concentrated comments. You shouldn't have to tell a story behind everything. That's typically my experience. I think sometimes we don't have enough experience. You have to over-explain yourself. But when you're in a position of leadership, you're in a position to condense all the information you've gained and make a very, very concise message. And
some people are good at
when we headhunted C-suite, we put bullet points about their profiles. We didn't indicate everything they've done in 30 years. That's just way too much language.
Yes. So let's get past the banner impact and talk about content. What would your tips and strategies be on content?
Typically what I see is companies repost or individuals reposting about their companies that they're partnered with, which is great. You're a team player. I could see all this stuff, but I have no idea who you are as a person. So again, mid-career leadership, you should be in a position to make decisions. And there's lessons you learn throughout your career. You could write compelling and concise messaging around that. And I feel a lot of people use LinkedIn as a reposting, or they share those quotes, which not a big fan of quotes in general, but they just reshare stuff that they might be feeling, but they didn't put any context behind it. And when you do that and you don't explain what the rationale is in a very clear, concise way, you've lost the audience. So when it's sharing content, have something thought-provoking that you think is of value to the community. I try to tell people not to get too political. I'm sure you have a lot of opinions about current situations. Don't delve too much. Again, it goes about professional branding, how you come across. You might have strong political views, but that's not who you are as a professional in your setting, right? That's just one avenue. So I don't recommend using LinkedIn for political statements unless you're a politician. Again, or advocating for something that's right. I have seen quite a few lawyers advocating when they've seen injustices. That makes sense. They are lawyers. They are calling out something unjust, and that's the perfect platform for it. But someone who's not in that position or complaining about your former company, like you just don't do certain things. And when we speak with profiles, we tell them to clean it up. If there is stuff there that's a bit messy or can be misconstrued, we are not having that sit on LinkedIn. it's more PR than it is HR a lot of times. But yeah, it is important what you post. And sometimes they say it's better not to post anything if you're not going to have something significant to say. Don't post for the sake of posting. Although it does generate views and stuff, it's not compelling to get people to keep looking at your content. So I did want to add another comment about the content aspect of LinkedIn, and something that you've done really well over the years, and it actually has the most value on LinkedIn. Instead of just liking a post or comment, something you've done well was responding with a thoughtful comment back to the original poster. And two things: it generates your views and your vision of what your reflection on that post is, but you always had something heartful and meaningful to add to it. And we've learned now on LinkedIn, liking something is different than putting a thoughtful comment to a post. And it does really speak about who you are as a professional. So when it comes to content, don't just randomly like things. Don't just randomly comment saying congrats, which I do often, but if they've done something great, congrats. But leaving a thoughtful comment back is invaluable. It means you actually read the material, you have something of value to say with your own perspective to add to it as well. So that's something I just wanted to give you accolades for, because you've been doing that forever. And I remember it from years ago, and now I see it. I was like, that's why she was doing it, because it is impactful.
I do it because I find people fascinating, and
Yeah.
I want to make them feel good and recognize them. But yes, I noticed I was in a coaching group once, and people would say what the top 3 things they did every week.
Mhm.
And there were 2 of us that commented on people's messages. And we were both HR professionals. I thought, what is it about us that are saying,
Care.
hey, that's great, great job here, or you should really be proud of yourself.
No, but they were always thoughtful, and they were different. It's not like you copy and paste. I would have been the type of HR that copy and pasted stuff. So thank God I'm not in that profession. But something I recognize over the years is that compelling, thoughtful message back to the original poster. It actually elevated your status, because I don't know if you knew you were doing that, but it actually, on the recruiter side, I look for these things because I could see everything you posted and everything you commented, and I want to get to know who you are as a professional. That's a great tool to use on LinkedIn.
And I think that's a good tip, because sometimes people think, well, how do people get to know me better? Well, when you
Mhm.
comment on somebody, that is a reflection of who you are.
As a
Thank you
person,
for
as a
that.
professional, right? So there we go.
So I guess the next part after the headline is the about section.
Mm. Let me talk about the about section. All
I
right.
see you're
So
smiling.
I love it because back in the day, everyone would write their life story about who they are and why they're here and all the good stuff. So here's the important thing about LinkedIn. You have 30 characters, give or take, on a desktop before someone has to hit the button see more. Within 3 seconds, no one is hitting see more. They're glancing. So again, language is very important. And I thought one of the best tools that I've learned, even working with you, Hilda, is that the How to Fascinate gives you authentic language. You should be using very distinct words about who you are in the first 30 characters. The best part is when I'm checking your profile on LinkedIn, you have 12 characters to work with. So the first 12 characters are even more important than the balance of the 30.
Wow.
That's how much of an impact you have to make when you're writing your about section.
That's such an important tip. Like, I remember years ago, there were so many characters. Then when I went to update my about section, what happened? I only have 50 words.
You only
Now
have
you're telling
1,500
me it's
now.
30 characters.
30 characters. So using things in person like I, first person, is not relevant anymore. Like, I just splice it up in as many pieces as you can to make the most compelling about section that you can. And of course, if you want to add more additional details and someone has time to research who you are, then yes, they'll hit the see more. But imagine if they've never hit that part, they're never going to learn about you anyways, right?
You mentioned the How to Fascinate,
Mhm.
and you were one of my first
Early.
programs. I actually got a picture of one of my earliest programs, and it was June 2019. So I've been
Oh, geez.
doing training
Yeah.
sessions, but this particular one we did online, and one of our after session programs was to talk about how to use LinkedIn, and you
Mhm.
were so bang on, like, because we'd worked together, 7 of us, during this training process. You said that I think there's a better word for your power language.
Right,
And
right.
you would, what I admired most was your ability to understand individuals, to take the keywords from the How to Fascinate and to use those keywords into LinkedIn so that they showed up much more powerful and capable than the words we might kind of choose ourselves. So you know how to really help people uplift their LinkedIn profiles for sure.
Yeah, and that's the one hard part that everyone struggles with because no one likes to brag. But it's not bragging, it's being authentic. And the person I see on LinkedIn should be the same as the one I'm going to meet with and should be the same one that I'm on the phone call with.
Yep.
So having authentic language is really, really critical. Don't use generic terms because you'll stand out as generic when I look for a profile. It's the reality. And it's the same thing with business leaders. If they're hiring managers, for example, the candidates are also searching you up. You have to talk about what type of hiring manager you are, what kind of leader you are for your team. So use authentic language there in the about section, talking about yourself, but in the terms of leadership that you bring to the organization that you partnered with. So no one can lose here. The only disadvantage is if you don't spend time on LinkedIn. It could take minutes if you really have a concerted effort, and it could be a forever project. It's living, right? It's always being amended, it's always being updated. So you should know how LinkedIn works to benefit best from it.
I love this point is not just, we're talking about how we can help employees or people searching for jobs, but also we're giving employers and hiring people and managers tips on strategies on how they can find the right candidate who wants you,
Hmm.
because if I'm looking and I got interviewed by Samantha Black, and I
Hmm.
go into her thing, she doesn't even have a face and very little information. I'm thinking, wow, what kind of manager is this person? I don't even know, right? So the more you show up at all levels, the organization and the leaders that are going to be working with these, other with people, the more you know about them, the more the the match is better, because it's not just about getting hired, it's the fit. It's the
Right.
fit between the manager and the person being hired. It's the fit with the organization and the values of the organization and the person who's looking for a job, because you definitely want to be in a place where you feel a sense of belonging, you feel an opportunity to grow, and you like your manager. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
top three reasons why people leave their organizations. So these
Right.
would be the top three reasons why people want to join an organization. Good bosses, opportunity for growth, and a good, healthy work culture.
Correct. And that's why it's even more important that you do spend time fixing your LinkedIn because people are doing homework, right? If I want a candidate to interview for a role, they're going to find out about the company, who are the people in there. They're going to spend time. This is their maybe next 5, 10 years of their life they're going to commit to. So they want to know who they're connecting with. And it builds rapport and trust when you have a very sound platform that you're using, giving that clear, authentic image of who you are. What we don't want to do is give that false sense of we're amazing, and then you get tied in, you sign the agreement, you show up, and you're like, this is not what I agreed to. And it's really hard. I mean, there's a leap of faith for both parties, right? Nobody really knows the type of company they're going to partner with
Yeah, yeah.
well past the probation period, right? They don't always know right away.
Any other thoughts about the about section before we move on to, filling in and describing some of your professional experiences?
Condense, condense, condense. That's all I could
Okay,
say.
the
It's not
key.
a space to tell a story that is for your meeting, perhaps, or once you get a job and the coffee breaks. But that's not the image you want to present yourself. So the about section should be clear and concise, has limited characters, but I mean, you should be able to still say something with conveying a strong message. Don't
Yeah.
leave it just 2 characters and say, "Oh, Perry said." Limit the words. It should be very, very authentic language. And yes, you can add further after the see more section, but it won't be the more critical stuff. Always put the one thing about the about section I did want to share. Most people, when they do that section, the most impressive part of everything they've ever done is the last sentence, and no one ever gets to that. So I always say, flip
Oh,
it. The most compelling
yeah.
thing you wrote was at the very bottom. Just reverse it, bring it to the top, and you'll see how much more impactful that is.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure.
When people are filling in their work history details. Um, some people are very concise, like they have nothing, and others, they're like 4 paragraphs. And I have my thoughts on it, but I want you to share what your thoughts are on people's their mini resume, or what would you call it?
Yeah, oversharing. A lot of people take the job description and they post it. And there's stuff on there they've never done, but it was on their job description, so they post it just to like elevate their status. And you don't need to do that. You should again take everything you've done over the past few years in your role, and you should be able to put it in a condensed format, maybe 2, 3 bullets max, and the critical stuff first. The one thing you shouldn't be putting on it, any job title and your description is the fact you were detail oriented or results driven. That has no merit, doesn't give anyone anything.
No.
What we have to remember is LinkedIn uses a Boolean search. So it is looking for keywords, but then people use fluffers. They put things that don't have any value, that don't bring that profile to the headhunter's attention, right? So it's good to post something, but 2, 3 bullets is max, and you should really try to concentrate what are the most critical skills you bring to the table, right?
And I would add to that, not just the skills, but the outcomes. That you created you implemented a $250,000 IT software program on time, on budget, with a team of 40 staff.
Correct.
Right? That says a lot then. Oh yeah, I helped with a software project. So tell us more about things that people should be putting into the professional experience section.
Other than, the experience section is such further down in your LinkedIn. Someone's really invested in your background to start looking there. So just again, 2, 3 bullet points, really, really clear messaging. And if you had a career break, LinkedIn now has a feature to put that in. Before, people would just have gaps in years and months and they wouldn't have to explain it. But if you've taken time off to raise a family, to travel, to go back to school, LinkedIn has allowed that topic to be covered and actually looks very polished. It says career break, and you can itemize the period of time you took away from LinkedIn from work, for example, right? So that's great too. Other than that, just don't put your job description on the experience. It doesn't really matter. And put it in chronological order, current first and everything else after.
Okay.
We also have people who are consultants. They have multiple consultancy roles, and how do they prioritize which they put first, right? So they have to put a bit of thought, see that it flows and there's some consistency in the messaging, and then take it from there. That's an area you can't play around with too much. You can't use language that's not authentic.
One question would be, how far do you go back? Is a decade enough? Is 2 decades enough for those that have that length of experience?
Depends how long you've been with the company. A lot of times, like for example, yesterday I was speaking with a profile, a sales professional with the same company for almost 20 years. So her LinkedIn looks like she's been in one job forever, which she has, but she had multiple roles within that company. So now you could show a timeline how you've evolved within the organization.
Progressive, yeah.
I would say 10 years max. It just gets
unless
messy.
it's the one job, right?
Plus it's
the
the
one
stable
organization. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
And if you're a consultant, you have 5, 6 jobs, that makes sense. If you're not a consultant and you don't have that stability, there is a bit more risk where people will make assumptions that you moved around a lot. But that's the reality. You can explain once they want to meet with you, but there's nothing you can say or do to address it otherwise.
Okay. Any thoughts for organizations and HR? Some people, they see a gap and they get skittish and they don't want to hire. They see, frequent moving around, and again, they don't want to hire. My feeling is sometimes you need, if the resume or the LinkedIn profile looks interesting, what do you have to lose to not inquire with even a quick conversation? What's your thoughts on that?
I fully agree. I think you lose quite a bit of talent when you don't ask the right questions. So ask. I've had candidates who look like they're moving every year, but they left the country during COVID, which made sense. Like they couldn't come back, so they were just figuring out where they wanted to settle. There was a high housing crisis in the country they moved into after COVID, and then they got shut down. They couldn't leave that. And then they moved for another opportunity to better their lives. So when they're young professionals and they're moving to better their lifestyle, you give them credit for that. You don't knock them and say, how dare you move during COVID, and why did you leave Canada, and how did you end up in the Middle East? And it's not fair. I always tell hiring managers, I would recommend an initial conversation to address your concerns, but
Yeah.
don't dismiss profile, especially if I've already vetted them, I've already talked to them, they're incredible. Trust me, I'm telling you they're good. Speak with them, and then we'll be on the same page after.
I think sometimes people hire because they have an image and they can't deviate from that. And they
Correct.
can't see that certain experiences are transferable. So if we're
Mhm.
looking for this experience, but if you've managed projects, you you've done these certain things, these skills can be transferable to being a people leader, to being, on time, on budget. You got to read between the lines and see how that may be very, very alignable to the job that you're looking for.
Yeah, and you can't teach that, unfortunately. I can't teach a hiring manager to do these types of reading between the lines, but I can advocate for the candidates when I talk to them and help
Yeah.
reassure the client. So I get asked all these questions all the time. Why the career break? Why did they move around so much?
Yeah.
What happened to their last job? Why did they take a package? Why didn't they tough it out? Whatever the case may be. So you get all kinds of questions, but as a headhunter, my job is to ask the right questions, have these answered prior to submission of the candidate, so there isn't any gaps in explanations, right?
Any other aspects that you want to share for recruiting on either side?
For LinkedIn and the platform,
Not necessarily LinkedIn, but just in general.
well, the market is really extremely challenging right now. Many people will tell you that. Before COVID, people would find multiple opportunities landing in their inbox, in their InMail through LinkedIn. They felt good about themselves because they always had headhunters approaching them. They might not have made a decision to leave, but it felt good. The common thing I hear today with a lot of executive leaders is it is really tough out there. And I imagine if it's tough for leaders who can change organizations, it's just as difficult for mid management or entry level people as well. So there is a big underusing of LinkedIn to try to network, to try to promote yourself, to try to advocate for yourself, because it's not a great space, unfortunately, in today's market. It is really tough. It's not just the tariffs, not just the grocery prices, it's the uncertainty with jobs and trying to find something decent to call home, right? So it is a big, big issue we're recognizing as headhunters. It's not like this. It hasn't been like this in 15, 20 years. And this is probably the worst I've ever seen it. But
Yeah.
it's another reason we talk about why and how it's important to take care of your personal branding now more than ever before, because it's that much more critical now.
Thank you. I mean, you've given such words of wisdom for LinkedIn. Before we go, I really would like to know if you would share some things in terms of the difference between doing it yourself, trying to find somebody on LinkedIn, posting it wherever, and using a recruiter, a seasoned recruiter.
Time is of the essence. We work evenings, weekends. Clients wrap up at 5 or 6. One thing we recognize is people are running companies. They don't have time to do this task. Even the HR departments are busy putting out fires, taking care of emergencies on tasks that the headhunting, the bringing, the luring of talent is not something that they have a lot of time for. What you don't want to do is lose that
And sometimes experience. Real.
experience as well. So we do such a thorough job of vetting the market. You'll have a really strong understanding what the market is doing. We've had to inform clients like you're paying well below market. This is the current market conditions, and that help clients be more competitive with their offers. So we try that. But the best thing we could tell you is we have ear on the ground. We know what's happening. We're giving you feedback and using a headhunter, especially someone that spends so much time with the candidates, will give you honest opinions. We don't want to fail you by giving you the wrong impression of who we're submitting. We'll give you very transparent, honest opinions. You may not like it at times, but it's better that we're honest than not being forthcoming and having it bite everyone in the back.
And I think the other thing too is that people don't realize that when they're searching and they post, what they're doing is they're getting recruiters who are or they're getting candidates who are looking for a job. And what you do, and you're really good at, Pari, is you search LinkedIn for the right candidate and you share with them the opportunity. Oftentimes these people are not looking. And the candidate pool of people not looking who are doing a fabulous job fit for your organization is better quality candidates than going through, a stack of, 50 resumes. But many of them are ruled out because they don't have that expertise or ability or the whatever you're looking for. Whereas you're looking in the LinkedIn pool, the 30 million people you said, right? And that's a distinction that I always found interesting versus, getting candidates from a job search that you're active about.
Right. Certain roles you don't need to use a headhunter for. It's just more time consuming at the end of the day. But I would still recommend, even if it's an EA, use a headhunter because it will save you a lot more time than waiting through 100 resumes and taking 30 calls and fielding them and trying to organize everything. What I would recommend is just use LinkedIn for its purpose, which is as a professional platform to secure talent. And yes, we do headhunt and we have to entice them to say yes to your organization. So there's this level of relationship we're building with the candidates because we're advocating for the client at all times, right? We ask for transparency at all times from both parties and we share communication in a very short period of time. We don't withhold, we don't carry conversations into next week. We give you all the information you need to make an informed decision, say yes or it's a no or it's a maybe, and then we continue the search or we halt it if we have to, right?
Talk too about that process. Once you say this is the candidate we want and the higher stage, there is this period of negotiating aspects of the offer. And I think this is where your role is really valuable.
Right. One of the things I've done over the past decade or so is I disclose what the candidate is looking for upfront because we don't want surprises. We don't want two parties to fall in love with one another and they couldn't afford each other all along, or the numbers would be an insult to the other party. So we typically disclose, and it's within market and it's reasonable. So we're not, asking for outlandish amounts. But I think, again, goes back to the transparency part. If we disclose what the candidate's looking for to leave their current company because they're not active, this is what they're seeking, and the client agrees to it, then we're all on the same page. So we don't like to wait until too late to start negotiating. And honestly, between you and I, Hilda, if we do that disclosure upfront, when it's time to negotiate, it's much easier.
Yeah.
We might have to negotiate a couple of vacation days here and there, but it's never material stuff, which is really something we focus on early on, how much notice period they give. I give all that information at the very beginning, which you typically don't ask when you're speaking the first time. And we provide feedback as well. That's one thing that I think is invaluable with headhunters. We'll go back to the client and share the feedback the candidate had after their first interview. And as HR, you probably never had to wrap up an interview and say, so what did you think? How did I do? Just something that doesn't happen, right? We do that. We call them back and say, how did your call with Hilda go? How did your meeting go? And they share very, very poignant feedback that we think is invaluable to get back to the client.
I mean, it's leading to that positive outcome at the end because you're that facilitator, that intermediary to make sure when you both like each other that it's a successful outcome. We've talked about LinkedIn and branding and how to enhance your profile so that you can shine. And we've talked about why there's a benefit to hiring you call it a headhunter, I'll call it an executive recruiter, and the value in some of the process. Before we go, what would you like to share with people, what you have to offer and how do we get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn.
Of course. So they can see the benchmark.
Right. You can definitely reach out there and we can have a preliminary conversation just to see how your branding is looking currently and how we can improve it. There has been times where I've told a profile there was 0 changes needed. So it is possible to have a really well-rounded, robust LinkedIn and you've intuitively figured out how to use the platform and they've done a great job. That's a 1%er. That's an outlier. most profiles need help, and that's okay. And I learned through trial and error. I learned even as a headhunter how to showcase my background on LinkedIn best. I would have selfies. I would have banners with quotes. I've done it all. I've experienced it all. It didn't result in success. What I recognize results in success is having a very clear message, because if that's the type of leadership you bring to the table, the imagery, the content should match it, right? And if I'm a creative writer, then I'm going to have a more creative presence on LinkedIn, right? And I'm not, by the way, so I'm pretty black and white as it is. So that's the way you have to know who you are and how to convey that message and be consistent and authentic, and use LinkedIn for its incredible tools that it has. And really, it is that. It's just a tool, but it's very effective if you do it right.
So how do people is the best way to go in on your LinkedIn?
Yeah, message, send connection. I think it's a really critical thing to do on LinkedIn, is network and send connections and connect with people through that forum, because that's how you build that relationship and schedule a preliminary call. It's the best first steps. And if you need support with the branding, we can definitely discuss that. But a lot of times when someone reaches out, the first thing I do is look their LinkedIn profile anyways, right?
They do.
So we all do that. It's human nature. Regardless, people say, don't judge. It's reality. And we have such a issue in society. Nobody has time anymore. And I've used this phrase before. It's probably not the most politically correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, Hilda. I call it our ADD society. It's just, we're so inundated with images and messages and electronics in our hands. And I have 2 laptops on right now. So this is my reality. And you can't just fall through the cracks and not stand out. That's the unfortunate reality that we're facing today. So, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pari, for joining me today and sharing your wisdom. And as I said, you are one of the best executive recruiters I have ever worked with. You go above and beyond the call of duty. And I was a witness to that so many times when I was working for an organization, and you and I partner up a lot now to help companies with their recruiting initiatives. So thank you.
I always tell the story to people is that you want something, you'll go after it. And we've had our late night calls. We've tried to coordinate closings and negotiations, but that's how you build relationships. And it's almost a decade and we're still communicating. And this is the value that we bring to the table, is that when you connect early on, the likelihood of that resulting into whether it's a professional or a friendship out of it is much more effective if you've initially done the groundwork and did that great networking opportunity that you and I had the pleasure of doing. I think it's been a decade now.
I know.
I don't want to age us.
I'm so pleased that you came on today and shared this wealth of insight and knowledge to help people who are trying to make sure they show up at their very best when they're trying to look for a new opportunity. And for those who are seeking, top talent, to find it and look for it and to know how to find it. So thank you. And thank you to my listeners and viewers. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should, because so many amazing speakers that can help you rev up your business. Thanks again. Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Business with Hilda Gan. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. For more HR tips, strategies, and to learn how you can create a people-centric workplace, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.